Many of you, the people I speak to, don't even know what is going on in your ministries or departments. You have very scanty information. The moment I know more than you in your ministry, then you must begin to understand that something is very wrong. How do you run a ministry or that department or a parastatal if you have no information? That is the highest level of incompetence.
Welcome back. That was the president on Tuesday at State House during a signing of performance contracts by CSS and PSS and senior officials of government parastatals. And Linus, this was clearly what we'd call a dressing down, because the president described some of his senior officers, including cabinet secretaries, as being utterly clueless and uninformed about what is going on in their ministries. And you could clearly see that he was disappointed with maybe quite a number of his 22-member cabinet. It seems like everything is not rosy. And remember, he picked these ladies and gentlemen as being given the responsibility of running government, of running ministries. What has gone wrong in a year?
Well, this was, I must say, this was a dreadful morning for cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries who are seated there in the tent, because this is, ironically, the day of signing the performance contracts. And so you are here listening to the oral appraisal from your boss, and clearly he's got many things to say. He's unhappy with the performance of many of you. Remember, the words were many of you. He didn't say some of you. He said many of you, the people I speak to, don't even know what's going on in your ministries. Now, many would suggest more than half. I don't know how many are, because the total is 22. Many can be even as high as 20, 22. It could be all of them, actually. And this was not a very good review for the cabinet secretaries. But again, this is unprecedented. I've looked around and checked whether we've ever had such a public dressing down of cabinet members, and I actually have not found any. We used to hear of very private dressing downs, and there are legendary ones from the Kenyatta era. You know, there was talk of even he could use his bakora on cabinet ministers that he was not happy with. There is a story, whether it was true or just speculation, that he caned some of his cabinet secretaries with his bakora. Moi era as well. We know he was a very, very particular leader when it comes to how he wanted things done, especially at cabinet level. But none of them ever displayed public displeasure at his team. So this is a two-sided sword. It cuts both ways. For President Ruto, it sets the tone. It shows that he stands for certain things. And I just wanted us to listen to this soundbite on lateness. You know, he had started by telling them, look, you don't even keep time.
If you cannot keep time with
Yes.
your employer.
Yeah.
This Council of Economic Advisors.
If you cannot keep time with your employer, you have basically dismissed yourself. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So, for those who came late, who are members of the executive, I will be expecting a written explanation, and it should not include matters of traffic.
You know, there was a press conference yesterday, and for a moment I was hoping the president is going to release some contents of the letters that came through from the previous day explaining, this is, dear Mr. President, this is why I was late.
late.
And for the president, it sets the tone of his administration that this is a boss that speaks his mind. He'll tell you off in public and things like that. There was even a part where he spoke about calling certain people. And he's been portrayed as a micromanager. He's been portrayed as a person who, goes all the way down to the ministries to find out what's going on and all that. But like I was saying, this is a double-edged sword. Is this going to deliver results, or is it going to scare your executive into some form of fake submission where it's about fearing being told off in public? I think it's something he needs to navigate very carefully, because for managers world over and in corporate spaces, there are styles that can give you results, and there are some that can actually cripple efficiency. And next door here we have an example in the late John Pombe Magufuli. He was very fond of telling off public officials in public. And that is not necessarily a good thing. You end up isolating yourself in a way because you become your own Mr. Efficiency. The rest of us are useless. It's a very, very, very delicate, thin line that the president has to walk. It's better to hear, for example, the banging of tables behind closed doors. That is good. That happens. I mean, when you read some books of how Bill Clinton will hit the roof on certain policy issues, but behind closed doors. And that is how tidy leadership also goes. Some of this display of public displeasure may not necessarily be good, because it dampens the spirit of these cabinet secretaries. And I want to imagine, Jamila and Sam, for those cabinet secretaries who had no idea what the president was going to talk about yesterday in the press conference, what do you think was going through their minds when they heard that there's a press conference at 1 o'clock? And there's a story about 1 o'clock we can talk about sometime. At 1 o'clock in the Moi era, you had to listen to the bulletin at 1 o'clock, because that was the bulletin that formed and dismissed government. That is the bulletin where appointments were made and dismissals were announced. 1 o'clock. So you are a cabinet secretary, late. You arrived late. Some of them, I'm told, were actually stooping, trying to look shorter than the human demeanor can allow, just to fit, because they were walking in late. And now there comes a press conference. And remember the wording in the press release? It wasn't clear. No. There is a press conference. Was it addressed to the
it was the statement. There's a briefing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that must have been a very long morning for the cabinet. I think worse than Tuesday, because you have to wait and see what is going to happen at 1 o'clock. Have I written my reply? And I hope I did not quote the traffic thing. And is there going to be a cabinet reshuffle? Let's face it, in media circles, what was the conversation? People are expecting, could it be a reshuffle? Maybe it's a continuation of what he said yesterday. And so you have cabinet secretaries that probably were living in fear yesterday. And my last point on this, unlike their ministerial predecessors, those who preceded them, the cabinet secretary of this day is not the minister of yesteryear. They don't have the political fallback that ministers used to enjoy.
As members of parliament.
They are highly, highly vulnerable public servants, because they entirely rely on the president's, they are serving at the president's mercy. Well, though even ministers served at the pleasure of the president, you would be sacked, but you'll still remain a member of parliament of your area, because you are elected. And some of them were kingpins. You dismiss them and they'll give you trouble out there. These guys are very vulnerable. So maybe private lectures would boost their confidence more than public lectures.
Maybe it's about, you talked about delivering on the plan, on the Kenya Kwanza government's plan. And the president has spoken about his plan and how they want to deliver on the promises that were made. And he's talked about the manifesto and how the delivery of services and whatever they're doing is as per the manifesto. And these CSs, PSs, head of parastatals, were appointed by the president. Before we continue, I'd really like to listen to the dress down didn't come from the president only. The deputy president also had a few things to say. I want him to talk about how they came with the president from the political space and were his friends. But saizi, sio urafiki, ni kazi. Let's listen to the deputy president.
We have done so much as an administration, but the information is not out there. Our ministers are quiet. They are called for TV interviews, they don't show up to say what they have done. And then the media have a field day because nobody talks for government. I would rather we spend more time explaining to the people of Kenya what we have done in our respective dockets as opposed to travel. And if we have to travel, let's travel up country to where wananchi are and explain what we are doing. I don't think the president will cap your travel out of Nairobi. I don't think he will. Especially those of us who came with the president from the political space and who are his friends, and we assisted him to become president. Once he gives us a job, that is the termination of that friendship. The friendship with the president will be based on nothing but performance. Performance. And me, I know. Mimi masomo yangu yuko chini kidogo, lakini I know a few things. Mimi, I know my relationship with the president is not based on my 20-year friendship with him, and I assisted him in the campaigning. It is based on performance.
Kind of reminds me of the shareholder comment. The government is a shareholder. Because now, it's totally different.
Right.
They were friends, yes. You were appointed in these positions because you were with us from the beginning. We won the election together, and you were given these positions. But are you performing in these functions that you have been given? Because the president has appointed you on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya who elected this government into power. Number one. Number two, there's the issue of communication that the deputy president was talking about, Gituku. This has come up before, about there being a gap in terms of how to explain government policies. Are people really understanding what you want to do? And who better would understand what's going on in their ministry other than the PS, than the CS? But hawaonekani, as the deputy president has clearly put it. So
Right.
unawatafutaga wakuja kwa show yako, wanakuja.
You know, the deputy
Some will start leveraging on that. Right? Just to daybreak, or I'll tell the deputy president.
You see, the deputy president loves to call himself the truthful man.
Yeah.
I think he's spoken a bit of truth in that statement. But he also said that masomo yake sio mengi, amesoma tu kidogo tu. According to his CV, he graduated in 1988 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and Literature, and he got second-class honors upper division. But of course, he has done so many other courses in terms of administration because of his background then. But all the same, he says some important things, and especially you can feel the dilemma that these political leaders may have, because remember, during the campaign period and also the months and years before the 2022 election, there was no idle weekend. And as it got closer to the election, there was no idle day. So these political leaders accompanied the president everywhere we went, that time as deputy president, looking for votes. And they were buddies. So probably they got too familiar with each other to an extent that now when some of these political leaders now go to the office, they're a bit confused because they still think we're dealing with our political elder brother or political senior, yet he has a promise to the people, he has a contract. I don't think there's any person who knows the plan better than the president in the political circle. And I also sympathize with some of the cabinet secretaries because I was just doing some quick tabulation. For instance, the Minister of Interior, National Administration, and those are the many things that are in that ministry. It has 3 state departments. And each department has several functions. So in total, the ministry carries 33 functions according to the executive order. You're talking about 18 in the Interior Department, 5 in the Correctional Services, and 10 in the Immigration Department. So a cabinet secretary in the name of Professor Kithure Kindiki has to understand all these 33 functions, study all the laws under that ministry or that guide that ministry, the regulations as well, but also be ready to attend to duty when the president calls. But when duty calls, for instance, you have to attend to a security meeting or there's something that has happened, it could be Shakahola, it could be a terrorist attack, he has to be there to listen. And the president, when he calls you, he wants answers. You can imagine at the National Treasury, the Treasury itself has 21 functions. The Economic Planning Department has 7 functions. In total, that is 28 key functions. But then again, there are also so many other agencies and departments that are under that ministry. You're talking about the very many offices. There are many appointments to be made. You have boards of directors to be appointed. And the minister has to know what exactly each parastatal within that ministry goes ahead to do. Because one day the president will call you. So you can imagine the president calls, let's say, the PS or the CS and tells them, I want an answer to this. So of course, what you do, you mobilize your staff that are working with you to get you answers for what the president is asking. And then before you get the answers to brief the president, then he asks about something else. You can almost understand why sometimes they might appear clueless, because you have so much to do. It is no excuse. You have so much to do within very little time, but also so much to understand, especially within your docket. And therefore it baffles when you find officials that have not finished what they're doing within their departments, but now starting to get attracted by functions in other departments. And I'm sure Jamila will be talking about that later on. But clearly, that spirit of cluelessness, the deputy president saying that actually the media is having a field day. I don't know what he means with that. But you can imagine you are on the panel, and the work that you do that requires a lot of reading and fact-checking and looking for information. Imagine a cabinet secretary has to do all that, not for TV, but for service delivery, but also the president might call at an unknown time.
Wow, and we used to hear Elinas of during former President Moi's time, there was actually a particular phone in the ministries. So minister, hiyo ikilia, unajua imetoka straight house na ukuwe na majibu. But you talk about how uko na majukumu mengi as a minister. And then is it a matter of not understanding? Because we are seeing CSs now, as you mentioned, wakiingilia majukumu ya wengine. I think to maybe elaborate on this more, we need to listen to CS Health, Susan Nakhumicha, giving a directive that was very interesting.
Sisi katika serikali ambayo tuko, tunafanya kitu kinaitwa one government approach. Haihitaji Kindiki kuwa hapa kumtransfer OCS ambayo yuko hapa. Mimi ni waziri katika serikali ya William Samoei Ruto. Nikisimama hapa ninawakilisha rais wa nchi ya Kenya. Kwa hivyo ya maneno ya OCS, niko hapa na ninatoa amri. County commandant kama yuko hapa na ananisikiza, na kama hako mahali pengine habari mfikie. Mnakubaliana OCS aende? Mnakubaliana OCS aende? Muambie waziri Nakhumicha alisema. Nikisimama hapa, mimi gari yangu iko na bendera. Na hiyo bendera sio mchezo.
Hiyo bendera sio mchezo. Linus, I wonder if OCS amesha ondoka. Because this is not the first time we are seeing a minister really overstepping almost their mandate and getting into someone else's backyard in terms of giving directives. We saw something also with this WorldCoin issue where we had two contradictory statements from two ministers, one saying there's nothing wrong with what's happening and one saying we are suspending operations. We saw instances where the deputy president was directing the police. What's going on? Is it a matter of not understanding what your responsibilities are, or is what she said one government approach? What exactly is that?
No, it's a mystery. I don't understand what she meant by a one government approach that would see a cabinet secretary in charge of health transferring a police officer. Remember, even the Constitution I think Article 245 sets it very clearly that there is the operational independence of the police, and it is under the Inspector General of Police. I know we have a very quiet Inspector General of Police generally. We've not heard much from IG Koome. I think since he took office, oath of office, we rarely hear him. But this is still not a reason for OCSs and police officers to now take instructions in terms of transfers, relocation from politicians. But this points at a problem, and it's a problem that comes with politics. I think in a moment of, I don't understand what it was, CS Nakumiches managed to show us what politicians basically do with power. Tumefika, I'm a minister, and remember she reminded us, niko na bendera, and bendera sio mchezo. That is the raw interpretation of power. And it's primitive in a sense, because now it thinks it supersedes the Constitution and any other existing structures. I've spoken, I'm the minister. This is not correct. This is not accurate. That's not how it runs anymore. In fact, the law sets rules on how a police officer can also be even dismissed from service. Not like how it used to work in the old days, where a minister can actually stand and say, you are transferred.
Yes.
The Constitution tries to move us from there. But we change the hardware, the software is still not working well. You have politicians who come with a mentality, some of them behave as if it is the 1988 election that they won. So not 2022. Those are very many years apart. How do you speak that way in 2023? Where is the IG in your mind? Where is the Constitution in your mind? Where is the National Police Service that is in charge of staffing of the police in your mind when you speak that way? So this was an unfortunate incident that involved the CS for health. But yes, we're yet to find out whether the police officer has been transferred. But there is always a net effect. There is some pressure that politicians exert on civil servants with this kind of pronouncements. Because even a police officer, even though they know that they are protected by the structures and how it actually works, the standing orders and all that, they'll be uncomfortable if that is the political environment they operate in. That I am in a post that a senior politician from this area or a senior cabinet secretary is not happy with, that becomes a problem. And I just want to make another point related to what Sam was saying about the cabinet secretaries coming into offices and many roles. There's something that we really need to appreciate, and this is the forgotten civil servant, the public servants that actually keep things going. Who do you think keeps the country afloat when parties are still fighting to decide in the Supreme Court who should be the next president? What keeps the country going? It is the civil servants. Who actually informs these incoming administrations about how it's done in government, how ministries operate? It is those civil servants. We heard yesterday from this same bench, actually the bench of Jeff Koinange, from four very eminent former permanent secretaries, actually some were permanent secretaries and some were principal secretaries, and then there was a CS. Those reflections were so insightful on just how it works. And the example was given of the Dream Team. And I remember we did cover the Dream Team of Richard Leakey,
Martin Odor.
Martin Odor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a team of, private sector honchos, people that had made very great strides out there. And they went to the public service. And the story, even as told by former PS engineer Orege yesterday, was they were just floating because they didn't have the roots. They didn't have the public servants with them. And I think when even the president is challenging the cabinet, it's also about their command of the structures below them. Do they understand what really happens all the way down to the junior-most civil servant in the ministry? Because ministries, luckily, we accuse them many times of inefficiencies and all that, but they follow certain structures. And if you're not careful, even as a cabinet secretary coming in, you will actually float the entire term. And there are stories of those who floated. And I don't want to mention names, but there were some very interesting inserts in some budgets some times back because, there were some CS that came and thought they know it all. And I think the civil servants in the ranks below just showed her that, hey, do you really know how it works around here? So I think government is an ecosystem, and I think I really hope that's what the president is trying to remind his cabinet, not to come as if they are prophets from somewhere or angels from somewhere who are coming to save the country and to the exclusion of everybody else. There are civil servants who have been, some of them who started there as young people. Mm-hmm. They went in there at age 22. And they've been growing up the ranks. They know how it functions. Some of them have serious qualifications, competencies that even these ministers, even these cabinet secretaries as they come, can benefit from. I think, to me, my interpretation of what the president also was saying is read well how it actually functions so that you know how the machine works. Otherwise, you'll end up looking like, you came with your own PlayStation toolkit, but that won't fit into the other system.
Gituku, there's a soundbite you're going to listen to the Vice President. He was talking about how sometimes when they're holding cabinet committees, they're missing some CSs and the meeting cannot go on. Wako wapi? The Deputy President is going to tell us, where are these CSs?
Why do you have to honor every invitation that you have been given to every country? Your Excellency, at times we have tried to hold cabinet committees, we can't. 5, 6, 7, 8 ministers are out of the country. Some change clothes at the airport from one country to another. That is the truth. Why can't you regulate yourself? If the president was to travel and honor every invitation, he will be out of this country the whole year. You just have to decide what is useful and other things you can leave to our ambassadors out of the country.
This was one, there were revelations.
Right.
Gituku reminds me of when the same deputy president told us, apana, kama kuna safari, look at what is a safari in a letter. But now he's complaining about those safaris, right, saying these guys are never there.
But, excuse me, humanly speaking, everyone loves to travel.
Yeah.
At least I do. But he's also raising some important matters because when everyone goes out of the country, remember, the structure of the government is president, deputy president, maximum of 22 cabinet secretaries. The ministries can only be headed by those 2 cabinet secretaries. So if one is not there, there's no one else to be a cabinet secretary or to even act in that capacity. Remember, recently the chief administrative secretaries were termed illegal, were quashed, the appointments were quashed. So there's no one to really take that responsibility. Again, even the oath of office for a cabinet secretary is different. So it's only the CS who can do the work of the CS. It is only the CS who can brief the president in cabinet, not anyone else, at least what the law provides. But then again, you ask yourself, if he's complaining that sometimes 5, 6, 7 cabinet secretaries are not available to even hold cabinet committees, how do they leave the country? Mm-hmm. Who approves their travel? The last I checked, remember that time when William Ruto was the deputy president and he traveled to, I think it was Uganda. Then after that, it was stated that he couldn't travel because he had not gotten the clearance from the head of state. So who clears cabinet secretaries to travel out of the country? I don't know what that says about the government at a time that, all things have to be coordinated. But then again, moving a little back to what CS Nakhumicha was talking about, the health CS, I think it's unhealthy for really to keep moving beyond the work of ministries. I look at the executive order. She has a whole 17 roles, 17 functions, big functions to carry out. There are several departments that are under her. But I think also there's a bit of obsession with the security arm or the National Police Service in this country, because everyone appears, they want to have a bit of control, to appear powerful because they can access some movement within the police service. The Deputy President, I think it was on Sunday, he was in Alliance School. He went to the Alliance for an event there, and he spoke at length, including what I'm going to quote, that he said that he was speaking to the Azimio leadership, that if in the next 2 to 3 months you're of good behavior and there's no chaos, we shall return the men to you, that is the security men, lakini sahi haiwezekani. And of course, he was talking about, I have not seen a commitment that you denounce violence and give Kenyans undertaking that you will not go back to the streets. Those policemen will stay on standby for now. So it got me thinking, because again, like Linus talks about the Constitution, it's very clear that it is only the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Interior Affairs who can give a policy directive to the National Police Service. Otherwise, the National Police Service is under the command of the Inspector General. And if there is any discussion on allocation of security, then it can only be done between the National Police Service in discussion with the Cabinet Secretary in charge of security, in this case, Professor Kithure Kindiki. So I wonder where the Deputy President comes in, especially to give such a pronouncement, knowing that he doesn't have the force of law. When the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Susan Khumicha, goes ahead and gives such a pronouncement, she knows very well that if there has to be any transfer, it has to be formally done. And that can only be done either by the command, the National Police Service the National Police Service Inspector General, or the National Police Service Commission itself. They're the only ones who can intervene in matters of human resource. So really, this is quite unfortunate, and one can only hope that it is not testament to what the president is saying about cluelessness in terms of how things are supposed to be done in government. Oh,
interesting times ahead, because remember, Gituku and Linus, the president did issue a new directive where he said that for travels, safari, top officials will only be limited to 45 days of foreign travel per year, and that all of them shall be sanctioned directly by the president himself. He also gave a maximum of 4 people, including the minister, if a trip is being led by a cabinet secretary. Let's see if these new directives will be fully implemented. Of course, it's time now for our final words. Yani mimi ndo kila kitu leo. Okay.